Drinking alcohol, smoking, and drug use are harmful to health.
In the winter of 1855, the county of Devon lay under a blanket of unyielding snow, the kind that muffles the world and turns familiar landscapes into ghostly realms. I was a young curate then, serving the parish of Littleham, a quiet hamlet nestled near the Exe estuary. My name is Elias Thorne, and though the events I am about to recount have been whispered in taverns and documented in yellowed broadsheets, the full truth has never been told, not until now. What began as a curious anomaly in the frost soon spiraled into a nightmare of trespass and terror, one that still haunts my dreams 70 years on. This is no mere folktale. It is my confession, drawn from the shadows of that fateful night. It started on the morning of February 9th, after a storm that howled like the damned. I awoke to the clamor of villagers pounding at my door. "Reverend Thorne, the devil's abroad," cried old Widow Hargrove, her face as pale as the drifts outside. I dismissed it at first as superstition, the ramblings of folk starved for sensation in our isolated corner of England. But when I stepped into the crisp air, I saw them. Tracks. Not the paw prints of a fox or the boot marks of a poacher, but singular, deliberate impressions. Cloven hooves, each about 4 inches long and 3 wide, spaced 8 inches apart in a straight, unwavering line. They began at the edge of the churchyard, snaking through the graveyard like a serpent among tombstones. The snow was pristine save for these marks, as if whatever made them had floated above the ground, pressing down only to leave its infernal signature. Villagers gathered, murmuring prayers and clutching crucifixes. "It crossed the estuary," one man said, "over 2 miles of frozen water, without breaking stride." Another claimed the prince ascended walls, traversed rooftops, and even squeezed through a 6-inch drain pipe in Topsham, emerging unscathed on the other side. The local magistrate, Sir Reginald Ashford, arrived with a posse of huntsmen, declaring it a hoax or the work of some escaped beast from a traveling menagerie. But as reports flooded in from neighboring parishes, Exmouth, Lympstone, Woodbury, the scale became clear. The trail stretched over 40 miles, perhaps 100, defying logic and nature. It ignored barriers, over hayricks, through locked barns, atop snow-laden roofs, where no creature could perch. In Bicton Gardens, it wandered the manicured paths of the Lord's estate before vanishing into the woods. I should have heeded the warnings. The bishop had sent word from Exeter, "Stay indoors, pray for deliverance." But curiosity gnawed at me like a rat in the granary. As a man of God, I felt compelled to confront this blasphemy, to prove it earthly and dispel the fear gripping our community. That evening, as dusk bled into night, I donned my heaviest coat, armed myself with a lantern and my worn Bible, and set out to follow the tracks. Little did I know, this pursuit would lead me into forbidden territories, both physical and spiritual, where trespassing meant inviting the abyss. The prince led south from Littleham, cutting across fields that belonged to Farmer Jenkins. I hesitated at his fence. Trespassing was a sin, and in those days, it could mean the stocks or worse. But the tracks mocked me, pressing onward without pause. "Just a glimpse further," I whispered to myself, vaulting the stile. The snow crunched under my boots, a stark contrast to the silent voids left by the hooves. No animal I knew walked in such a rigid single file. It was as if the thing had but 2 legs, hopping with unnatural precision. As night deepened, the wind picked up, carrying distant howls that might have been wolves or something fouler. The trail veered into the dense thicket of Blackwood Forest, a wild expanse owned by the reclusive Lord Harrington. Signs warned of gamekeepers and traps. Poachers had been shot there before. My lantern flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced like demons. I pressed on, the prints glowing faintly in the moonlight, almost luminescent. Was it my imagination, or did they pulse with a subtle warmth, melting the snow ever so slightly around their edges? Deeper into the woods, the air grew thick, laden with the scent of decay, rotting leaves perhaps, or something more sinister. I stumbled upon a clearing where the tracks circled an ancient oak, its bark scarred with what looked like claw marks. Hanging from a low branch was a rabbit, gutted and strung up, its blood frozen in crimson icicles. No hunter's work. The incisions were too precise, too ritualistic. My heart pounded. This was no mere wanderer. This entity hunted, toyed, desecrated. Trespassing further, I emerged at the edge of Harrington's estate. The manor loomed in the distance, a Gothic silhouette against the starry sky. The prince led straight to its wrought iron gates, which stood ajar despite the Lord's infamous paranoia. Whispers in the village spoke of Harrington's occult interests, secret societies, forbidden tomes smuggled from the continent. I should have turned back, but the Bible in my hand felt like a talisman, urging me forward. Slipping through the gates, I followed the trail across the manicured lawns, now marred by those infernal steps. The house was dark, save for a single light in an upstairs window. The prince ascended the outer wall, impossible, climbing like ivy to a balcony. How? No ladder, no vines. Gripping the trellis, I hauled myself up, my breath ragged, muscles screaming. This was madness, breaking into a nobleman's home. But the compulsion was overwhelming, as if the tracks themselves whispered invitations into my mind. Inside, through a cracked French door, the manor was a labyrinth of dust-shrouded furniture and echoing halls. The prince continued on the parquet floor, unscuffed by the snow outside. How had they transferred indoors without melting? They led to the library, where shelves groaned under arcane volumes, grimoires on demonology, alchemical treatises, maps of ley lines crisscrossing Devon. In the center, Lord Harrington sat slumped in an armchair, his eyes wide in frozen terror, throat slit ear to ear. Blood pooled around him, but not a drop marred the hoof prints that encircled his body like a noose. I gasped, dropping my lantern. It clattered, spilling oil that ignited in a brief flare. In that moment, I saw it. Shadows shifting in the corner, a form coalescing, tall, humanoid, with legs bent backward like a goat's, ending in cloven hooves. Its eyes burned like embers, and from its maw came a low guttural laugh that echoed through my soul. "Trespasser," it hissed, its voice a chorus of whispers. "You followed. Now you see." Panic seized me. I fled, crashing through the house, out the balcony, tumbling into the snow below. The entity didn't pursue, at least not visibly. But as I ran back through the woods, the prints multiplied. What was once a single trail now branched, encircling me, herding me like prey. I heard footsteps behind, soft thuds in the snow, always just out of sight. Branches snapped, leaves rustled without wind. Something was toying with me, reveling in the chase. Stumbling into a ravine, I found an old chapel ruin, long abandoned after a plague outbreak centuries prior. The prince led inside, disappearing into a crypt beneath the altar. Forbidden ground, trespassing on hallowed soil desecrated by time. Desperate for sanctuary, I descended the stone steps, my Bible clutched like a shield. The air was fetid, thick with mold and the metallic tang of blood. Torchlight from my relit lantern revealed horrors. Walls etched with symbols, pentagrams and runes that seemed to writhe. At the far end, a stone slab held remnants, bones, human and animal, arranged in mocking symmetry. And there, in the flickering light, the entity revealed itself fully. It was no devil from scripture, but something older, primal, a being of shadow and frost, its skin mottled like bark, horns curling like thorns. It had trespassed into our world, leaving its marks as a claim, a map of domination. "We walk where we will," it growled, advancing. "Through walls, over souls. You invited us with your doubt." I recited psalms, thrusting the Bible forward. It recoiled, hissing, but not before its claw raked my arm, leaving a wound that burned like hellfire. I bolted upward, sealing the crypt with a fallen beam. Outside, the snow had begun to melt under a sudden thaw, erasing the prints as if they'd never been. But the scar on my arm remained, a cloven mark that festered for months. By dawn, I staggered back to Littleham, babbling of devils and murders. The villagers found Harrington's body, but blamed it on thieves. The tracks were dismissed as a collective delusion, explained away by scientists as mice hopping or badgers foraging. But I know the truth. That entity still walks, trespassing boundaries between realms. In quiet nights, I hear its hooves tapping at my window, waiting for me to follow again. Years later, in 2009, similar prints appeared in North Devon, a woman's garden defiled overnight. They say it's coincidence, but I wonder, has it returned, seeking new trespassers? If you find such marks in the snow, heed my warning. Do not follow. For in pursuing the unknown, you invite it to pursue you, and the horrors it unveils are not meant for mortal eyes. This account, penned in my final days, is my absolution. May God forgive my trespasses, as I forgive those who doubt.